Hello, and welcome to Great.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Lynn Maluli, Executive Director at Water for South Sudan, an organization delivering sustainable quality of life services to and with the people of South Sudan by efficiently providing access to clean, safe water and improving hygiene and sanitation practices in areas of great need. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app because today we're going to learn about an organization that has drilled over 456 wells serving 300,000 people in South Sudan. Hello, Lynn. Welcome to Great.com Talks. We're excited to have you here.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. How would you describe Water for South Sudan for someone who is not familiar with your work?
So, as you mentioned, we provide water, sanitation, and hygiene services in South Sudan. It's the newest country in the world, one of the poorest, and there's just a tremendous need for access to clean water, and that's what we provide. We directly provide it to them. We have our full team in South Sudan, so there's no middlemen. We own all our own equipment, hire our own people, so the service comes directly from us.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. You mentioned South Sudan being one of the youngest countries in the world, and now indeed in the need of clean water and water services, and the fact that your organization is there to assist them in the journey of building the ecosystem around clean water is very, very important. Could you please describe how big of an issue is the absence of access to clean water, clean and safe water is in South Sudan?
Sure. Yeah. It's, being a country with so new and with such little infrastructure, even record keeping is difficult to do. But, it's estimated at least half the people in South Sudan do not have access to clean drinking water and water for other uses on a regular basis. And in addition to not having clean water, they do not have access to sanitation, which is toilets. So that leads to many other problems as well. So we're attempting to address those issues, kind of bringing people their most basic need. From there, they can grow, but until they have those needs met, they're just living at such a low subsistence level, and health is in danger, and there just can't be schooling or medical issues taken care of if there's not clean water. So we start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Wow, every second person doesn't have an access to clean and safe water. That's 50% of the population. And water and safe water is like necessity. It's a basic needs of humans. And once you don't have access to it, then other parts of your life becomes more challenging. There are more obstacles. You mentioned about sanitation, about also the school kids not having enough resources to lead a healthy school life. What's the main reason for this absence? You mentioned that the South Sudan is a new country, but what is the government doing to make sure that its people have enough water?
Wow, that's a big question. South Sudan was part of Sudan for a very long time, and it just didn't get the services that the whole country got. It was very far removed from the capital. And then when the country became independent 10 years ago, the government just didn't have the resources. So there's just not the infrastructure. A lot of the rural population in South Sudan it's a cattle culture, so they would travel with their cattle, over the course of the year, finding water sources. So there wasn't as much permanent housing set up. So it's just been, decades of a government not being able to provide it to its people. So eventually they should, and we hope they will. But in the meantime, we're there filling, a lot of those gaps.
Mm-hmm. The absence of resources and the infrastructure seem to be the main reason. Yeah. Of the absence of access for people yet, and also the country being very new and now just building from the scratch after conflicts. It's just in the beginning stages of forming a healthy society. So it's understandable that issues remain urgent and unresolved. Your founder, Salva, is the native of Sudan, and he has an inspiring story that led to him founding your organization. Could you please share his story with us?
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and you almost can't believe it's true, except it is. And he also, his story is shared with many, many others. He was not the only one who had this experience, but when he was a young boy, 11 years old, in 1985, about the civil war between what was then Sudan and Southern Sudan literally came to his village. He was in school and was told to run as, gunfire was erupting. And so he left everything and wound up traveling with groups of people. They became known as the Lost Boys of Sudan. He calls himself the Walking Boys, but they walked east towards the sun. They headed to Ethiopia, and they made it. They made it there under tremendously challenging situations. Many boys died, hunger, thirst, animal attacks. They lived in refugee camps there for 6 years, and then were forced to leave there. They walked back through southern Sudan to Kenya and landed at the Kakuma refugee camp, where he lived for another 4 years. So he spent 10 years of his growing up years in refugee camps, and then had the great good fortune to come to the U.S. in 1996. He was settled in Rochester, New York, and thought his father was dead. And his family thought he was dead. And then about 5 years later, he got the word that his father was actually alive, but suffering greatly from waterborne diseases. So Salva made his way back there, met his dad, who didn't know who he was, because Salva was a young man by this point, and Salva resolved to drill a well for his dad, because the doctors told him his father would likely die if he kept drinking contaminated water. So in a nutshell, that's the story. And it's told in this book that I mentioned to you, but it's an amazing story. And so Salva, with help from his American friends, just started this nonprofit, and that was in 2003. We drilled our first well in 2005, and we've just taken off since then. So it's been a wonderful journey of just grassroots support and supporting grassroots development work in South Sudan.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Salva's many young boys of his generation that went through this process, that went through the journey, is very, very inspiring. The 10 years being refugees in Ethiopia, then walking all the way down to Kenya, and I can only imagine the struggles he and his mates that were in the journey together faced. But the fact that he was able to found this organization that gives back to his community, to his original community in South Sudan, and to his father and all the people that have connection to his native land is very, very important. And he is an indication that the struggles that you go through can make you stronger, and then you can become, as discussed earlier with you, a philanthropist and a role model for many, many, many generation and many, many youth around the world. You mentioned that your organization builds wealth, and you started building wealth in 2003. Could you please tell us the process of well drilling? How do you find the locations? How do you determine which areas need wealth? And if you could tell us about the whole supply chain in the process, we would highly appreciate it.
Sure, of course. So we operate just in South Sudan, and we work with local government officials, so often state and county governments, to determine areas of need. So we operate during the dry season, which is roughly November to May. That could be shifting because of climate change as the rains, come earlier or later. But we find areas of need, and then we we work with local leaders, so village elders and chiefs, to determine exactly how many wells we could put in a given area. So the need is far greater than we can supply. So example could be, say we have 10 wells we could provide in one county in a season. We would then meet with the village elders to determine the best placement for those wells that could serve the most people. And so it's not our final decision, it's the local leaders who decide. So we have complete buy-in from the local leaders. They also contribute, just labor, to help clear brush so our trucks can get in, all kinds of help. They select managers and people that we can train to maintain and repair wells. We also do hygiene training in every village, and the local leaders pick who attends those trainings for men and for women in each village. It's a train the trainer approach, so they can then share what they've learned with us. And then when we're finished, a well takes about 3 to 5 days to drill, assuming you don't run into any issues. And then we turn the well over to the village. It becomes their property. It's their community resource for them to manage in every way. And then supply chain, you mentioned, is a challenge in the world's newest country. We bring almost all of our supplies in from other countries. But we also, we try to connect the villagers where we drill a well with what local supply chains do exist, which often could be other local NGOs and county and state governments. So, everything breaks. There's, nothing lasts forever. So we are also trying to help support local repair initiatives, just like we have repair people in the developed world fixing our appliances and things. So that can be a way to sustain these community resources that we build. And sustainability is a huge part of what we do. We have very high standards for how we drill a well, that we seal it completely so we're not contaminating the aquifers. And then we leave the community with the resources to take care of their well, hopefully, long into the future, so that this new resource is a continuing resource and doesn't dry up or break and lead them right back to where they had been before.
What I really like about your approach, as you're building this community service, you mentioned you are building it together with the members of the community, with the elderly in the villages, and you firsthand, based on conversations, based on engagement with them, what needs do they require, and where would be the efficient and most resourceful place for them to build the well. So that's very, very important, because essentially it's for the members of the community in South Sudan, and the fact that they have a voice in it, and they decide together with you how to do it and how to restore it and how to take care of it in the future is very, very important. As you have built more than 456 wells in the region, I can only imagine the impact it must have on the people that live next to those wells. Could you please firsthand tell us what kind of impact does it make in the lives of the communities and the areas that you built at the wells?
Sure. So our wells, every well we've drilled, to the best of our knowledge, is still working. So that's hundreds of thousands of people that are being served by wells that we drilled every single day. So I'd say the first thing that changes is health. Health improves for everyone, but particularly the most vulnerable people, elderly, and then children under age 5. So as your listeners might know, children under 5 are quite vulnerable. If a child can make it to its 5th birthday, there's a good chance that he or she will then make it to adulthood, because contaminated water can lead to diseases that basically cause diarrhea that's just much more dire for young children. So health improves, pregnant women also, but the whole community. So that's the health piece. Educational impacts, you're probably not going to have a school in a village if it doesn't have a well. So we don't build schools, we don't set them up, but once a well is there, the community can then, if they so decide, work towards having a school, and or other NGOs, the government can come in. But the well, again, would be the first thing. And then markets is another thing that quite often comes up quickly once people are not spending their days. We talk about the way people get their contaminated water is often walking long distances, and often it's the young girls. So when you free up girls and women, then they can have economic opportunities to make things or grow their own food and sell some of the surplus. And then local markets can grow up. And then that just raises everything in a village. And then finally, not only does health improve, but potentially a clinic could come in. But again, you want a well, you want clean water if you're going to be providing some kind of healthcare. So education, healthcare, and markets are the kind of 3 areas that really blossom when a village gets a well.
We all know that child mortality in underdeveloped and developing worlds is one of the main reasons of childbirth, and the fact that by building wealth in those areas of need in South Sudan, you're making sure the child you're helping in the process of making sure that less children die from contaminated water and they have access to clean water as well. As you mentioned, it's the first step for people to building a school. The first step to education is meeting the basic need of clean water, as well as once people free up their time, instead of going miles further away just to get the water, now they can build markets, they can build economy around the village, and also learn new skills that can further improve the quality of their lives. So just by building a well and making sure people have access to clean and safe water, you build life in that community. You make sure that life improves and the quality of life improves. So that's a whole chain, that's a domino effect that goes by making sure the first step of having access to clean water. Besides building and drilling wells, you mentioned that you also run sanitation and hygiene education around the communities that need education. Could you please tell us more in detail about your work in this area?
Sure. So, yeah, so our hygiene team, not only do we drill wells, we also repair wells. So we have a separate team that drills and a separate team that goes back, repairs our oldest wells and potentially other wells too. So with both of those teams, as they go out, a hygiene team travels with them and then conducts this hygiene training. I mentioned before, we train 4 men and 4 women in each village. So clean water is great, but if you don't keep your water clean, then you're not really progressing. So we teach. We start off with what is a community's needs. What hygiene needs do they see in need of improvement? So we don't just have, a set program in every village, but people like to work on, that there's open defecation or household hygiene. But some of the things we do teach are simple personal hygiene, clipping nails, brushing teeth, how to keep your jerry can clean, simple household hygiene around cooking, and then, even hygiene around the well. How do you keep the well clean? And we've been doing that for a number of years. And then this past year, our hygiene education expanded into COVID. So you might imagine in rural South Sudan, people are not connected to news sources. So we were going out, partnering with UNICEF to deliver messages. What is COVID? How is it spread? And how can you prevent it? So helping people in all those ways. So hygiene just goes hand in hand. Speaking of hands, hand washing is a huge, we've all become much more aware of that during the pandemic, but that's a fundamental item that we deliver to people at education. Not only that hand washing is important, but how can you find ways to wash your hands in a rural village? So you can have the grandest plans, but if people aren't shown how to do it in a simple way, then it's not helpful. So again, everything we do has to be sustainable and able to be done at the village level. So what local supplies do people have that they could use to wash their hands? And then we really like working with young people because the potential for behavior change is so much greater. So sanitation, which we've done one large project in a school, we're planning another one for next year. So impacting young people in that impressionable time of their life. Here's what sanitation is, here's why it's important. And then when they grow up with that, hopefully they take that into their adult lives, and we'll work to spread that around the country. Not having access to sanitation, it also interrupts education. So if kids don't have a way to relieve themselves, they have to walk out into the bush. And then, some kids might have to walk 20 or 30 minutes. At that point, maybe you just walk home. And then, as your listeners might also know, as girls approach puberty, if they don't have sanitation services at school, if they don't have ways, have toilets and ways to wash their hands, they very likely might just drop out of school. They're more likely to then marry young, start having children young. So all of these things, it's a domino effect, as you said. So these simple things that we completely take for granted, access to clean water, being able to wash your hands, access to a toilet, bringing those, again, bring those to communities, gives them that base level of support, and then they can start growing from there.
Mm-hmm. It's great to hear that your focus is also, although it's on the whole village and the whole population, yet your main focus is on educating youth as they are the future, as they are a part of society that can be taught much easily. And the fact that once they learn at this critical age, at from the young age, how to have the right use of sanitation and how to be more hygienic, then the quality of their lives improves, and then they're more likely to lead a healthier life compared to if they learn it at like at the age of like 30 or 40 or 50. But still, having, if you weren't educated before, now through the sanitation and hygiene education programs that you go through the villages. And you mentioned they are very custom based on the needs of that particular village. So it might be a household, it may be just a basic sanitation and hand washing, but the fact that it's customized on the needs of each and individual families or villages, it's very, very important, because they may be a variety range of the needs, yet people need to understand how their own needs is being met. So that's very, very important. If someone would like to support Water for South Sudan, how can they do that?
They can go to our website, which is waterforsouthsudan.org. And there's multiple ways you can give. Many schools actually wind up setting up fundraisers for us. So you can always just make a personal donation. And then there's also ways to set up fundraising pages if people are interested.
Mm-hmm. The link to the Water for South Sudan website will be provided in the description. So you viewing and listening can go to the website and familiarize yourself with the work Lynn and the team at Water for South Sudan are doing, and make a contribution if you wish to. Thank you so much, Lynn. It was wonderful to get to know you and the great work your organization is doing for the people of South Sudan.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk.
For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube and podcast algorithm that this conversation is important, that having basic need of having access to clean and safe water is very, very important for the people of South Sudan. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.